Welcome to another episode of We Don't Die. Well, who am I kidding? This isn't just another episode. This is episode 300. I'm your host, Sandra Champlain, author of the international best-selling book called We Don't Die, A Skeptic's Discovery of Life After Death. And I really want to thank you for listening, whether this is your first episode or you've listened to all 300. Over the past 4 years, I have been committed in bringing you the very best guests, the best conversations, the best evidence of the afterlife, and empowering you to live a great life. As this is a special episode, I have a very special and wonderful guest. Today on the show, we are welcoming back fourth generation and world-renowned psychic medium Mark Anthony, who's better known as the Psychic Lawyer. Mark is an Oxford-educated attorney and the author of the best-selling books Never Letting Go, Healing Grief with Help from the Other Side, and Evidence of Eternity, Communicating with Spirits for Proof of the Afterlife. His website is evidenceofeternity.com. Mark is regularly featured on major television and radio shows and is a headliner speaker nationwide. In fact, Mark has graciously accepted to be the keynote speaker at my We Don't Die Orlando event, March 29th through 31st. He'll kick off the event with his keynote speech on Friday and close the event on Sunday evening with a special evening of spirit communication. You don't want to miss it, and you can find out more at WeDon'tDieOrlando.com. Mark Anthony, my friend, welcome back to We Don't Die Radio.
Sandra, it is so great to be here. You are like my sister from another mister.
Aw.
Every time we get together, we just start cracking up, and we have so much fun. And so I want to thank you for having me on the show, and I want to thank all the listeners for tuning in.
Thanks. And really, episode 300, and you're the one I wanted to be my guest for this, because this is a big deal.
It really is. It's such an honor to be here. And the thing is, I don't know how many people realize this, but the whole We Don't Die movement that you have started is really, it's gained so much momentum, and it's just getting bigger and bigger. And, we've not only done events in Arizona, but now you're taking the We Don't Die conferences around the country. I think you just wrapped up one in Boston, and then we're gearing up for the one in Orlando, which is going to be right at Lake Buena Vista, right on Disney's doorstep. So this is going to be a lot of fun.
And you can make a vacation out of it and have some really great content and a great program to attend. So I'm excited. WeDon'tDieOrlando.com is that website. Mark, many people, this might be their first episode and have not heard you. You are a guest originally on episode 124, but would you mind just talking a little bit about you and your background and how you got into this wonderful world of mediumship?
I didn't really have a choice when it came to being a medium. And the reason that I say that, Sandra, is both of my parents had these abilities, and it runs in my family on both my mother's and father's side of the family for generations. There have always been people with these gifts, and I've tracked it back to the late 19th century. And the reason that I haven't been able to go back any further is that the records are fragmentary, and plus anybody that would have known someone in that time frame, they have transitioned to the other side.
Right.
And my father was a Navy SEAL and a NASA engineer, but he had this ability to see and hear spirits. And his sister Marjorie did, his mother Isabel, and his maternal grandmother Grace did. And then my Mom was amazing. She was like the whole package. Mom could see future events. She could perceive spirits. And her maternal grandmother, who would be my great-grandmother, Giovanna, was actually featured a couple years ago in a PBS special that was on television called The Italian Americans. And Giovanna, she died way back in the 1960s, but she came from Italy to New York City, and she gained a reputation as the woman who knew things. And nuns, priests, and even bishops and cardinals used to consult with her because of her spirituality. So, I mean, this is the family that I was born into, and so when two parents have the same recessive genetic trait, recessive meaning it skips a few generations, but they both had it, and then the likelihood of one of their children having these abilities increases greatly, and that child happens to be me. So I was born into this world where by the time I was about 3.5, I started talking to all my invisible friends, and mom and dad were okay with that to an extent. My dad wasn't so happy because of the way his family, particularly his sister, had been treated, but they understood what was going on. So, and they were very good about telling me, just keep this in the family because people will not understand. So that's a snapshot of my family background. And so as I got older, I was drawn to the clergy. I wanted to, having been raised Catholic, I had considered very seriously, Sandra, going into the clergy as a priest, but I found it too restrictive and constricting in a number of ways. And I know my parents were telling me, they said, Mark, the problem is they're going to tell you no, 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 when what we see is much broader than the restrictions of a religion. And so I thought there was too many rules and regulations in becoming a priest, and so I went to law school. So I guess I traded yeah, go figure. I guess I traded one set of rules and regulations for another. But it's always been with me. It's organic to me. And then it got to a point where I decided to practice as a medium and a public speaker full-time, although I still appear on shows like this one and on TV and radio as a legal analyst, paranormal expert, attorney, and psychic medium. And a lot of times in cases where the paranormal and the legal system collide, such as demonic possession as a defense, or does a house with a haunted reputation, how does that affect property values? I was on radio about the Slender Man stabbings. I was on CBS TV show The Doctors, and I did a reading in a cold case, and I'm very honored and humbled to say that the information that came through me from the spirit of the murder victim led to the arrest of the killer last year.
Terrific. Wow. That's extraordinary. Do you remember, Mark, at what point, I mean, I don't need to know the point where you said, even though I've gone into law, the spirit world's knocking too much and I really need to work on their behalf and help mend grieving hearts? Or did it come out of wanting to help people with grief at the time, or more giving evidence of the afterlife?
Well, I always had a bit of a reputation, if you will, in the legal system for definitely being different and definitely having insights that a lot of other attorneys didn't quite catch. And but there's a whole bunch of stories there. But focusing on your question, when my mother died, it was really hard because what had happened is I was at my office, and all of a sudden I felt like having spaghetti. So I picked up the phone and I called my mom because I lived in the same city, and she says, "Hey, honey, I made spaghetti for lunch. Can you come over?" And I said, "Sure." So I went over, and I remember sitting there and we were eating spaghetti, and my dad was there, and we were laughing and talking, and mom looked tired, and I was a little concerned. But I'll never forget this, Sandra. When I was getting ready to leave, she hugged and kissed me. She always did, but she said, "Mark, I love you so much, and I'm so happy that you've been my son." And it was like, well, gosh, Mom, thanks. I love you too. And I give her a big hug and a kiss, but it felt kind of strange. And the next morning I was in court, and the judge's assistant came into the courtroom, and she said, "Mark, we need you right now in the judge's chambers." So the judge was on the bench, so I knew something bad had happened. And I went into chambers, and I got the phone call that my mother had died in her sleep. And talk about pulling the rug right out from under me. And within days, I started getting visitations from her. But there was this one, and I'll never forget. Um, I was in my car, and I had to pull over, and all of a sudden this flash went off in my head, and I was in the driver's seat, and I was physically alone in the car, and I looked to the passenger seat, and I could see my mother's silhouette, and it was like this silver white light. And this message came to me, and it said, "Mark, you have been given the gift of mediumship so that you would not be crushed by grief, but now you must help those who are suffering with theirs." And it was very interesting, Sandra, because I don't believe that anything is a coincidence. I don't think anything is random. I'd say within the next year, events started leading to where all of a sudden the door to doing mediumship full time opened. And I realized this is what I was supposed to do. So, I certainly keep up my certification on being an attorney, and that's why I use it now in the form of a legal analyst and to help police on cold cases. So, in a sense, I'm still practicing law, but the focus of my life's work now is fivefold. It is to help people understand that God exists, that heaven, the other side, the afterlife, nirvana, whatever you would like to call it, exists. 3, that our soul is an immortal living spirit. 4, we can and do communicate with souls. And finally, that we will be reunited with our loved ones in the light. And that became very, very clear to me, and that is the focus of my life.
Oh, I just brought a big smile to my face. I had an opportunity to travel to England last September to an event that nobody knew me, which was really nice. And it was a small gathering with a handful of mediums and other people talking about the afterlife. And a medium from Europe got up and she just started reading the crowd. And she brought through my father with as much detail as you could possibly give. Airline pilot, captain for American Airlines. I mean, just boom, boom, boom. And I was blown away. But the message was, your father says he sees you putting on events in the United States, bringing this feeling that you're feeling now to others. He wants you to remember the pain that you felt from grief and the love you now feel. And your job, and he walks by your side, is to give that to other people. And like that you got from your mom, I feel like I've got that from my dad. And you and I both have felt the sting of grief on several occasions. Just because we believe doesn't mean we don't feel the pain. But,
yeah, exactly.
But anyways, definitely I support you on your passion and your mission.
Well, that's why you and I are talking now. That's why we're doing this show, because both of us, yes, we're involved in the metaphysical world and this work with the afterlife. And there was a time when this was considered completely fringe, if not demonic, by religious fanatics that passed themselves off as Christians. But now this is becoming mainstream. It's being discussed. I mean, I was on a national television show discussing this, or I mean, on several shows throughout the country, and on a number of national shows, both on TV and on radio. I've written books about it, explaining the quantum physics aspect of it. I've been in laboratories with scientists who are studying the afterlife. So this has gone from being fringe to being mainstream. And so the work that you're doing and the work that I'm doing is the natural and logical progression and response to what has both happened to us. The thing is, Sandra, what you said was so very poignant. You were grieving, you went to England, and the messages from the other side, from your dad in particular, came through to say that you'll be doing these conferences to help people have this healing feeling. Healing feeling. Ooh, I like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's very much what happened with me, because I had gotten to the point in my career. And one of the reasons that I am taken seriously is because of my credentials. I mean, I attended Oxford. I graduated with honors from law school here. I'm a member of the United States Supreme Court Bar, Florida Bar, Washington, D.C. Bar, and I've tried well over 300 jury trials. And, I'm not some guy running around with daisies in my hair, snorting granola saying, oh, like whatever, did. It's like, and same thing with you. You're an extremely credible and serious person. And when somebody dies, it is a life-changing event for the survivors. Yet we have a choice, not in the fact that they died, but how we respond to it. And in my work as an attorney, certainly and definitely as a medium, I've seen people choose the path of drugs and alcohol, avoidance, denial, acting out, and the rage behaviors. Those never have a happy ending.
Right.
Then there's other people who explore their spirituality, find a connection with the higher power, with God. And what happens is they become more spiritual, they become deeper, more compassionate, and they understand that death is transference of energy from the material world to the other side. Now, just because we understand that, and you said this perfectly, that like it doesn't affect us. Oh, it hurts for the listeners. It hurts Sandra, and it hurts myself every bit as much as it does anybody else. The fact that we work with the afterlife and work in the metaphysical realm gives us insights and helps us cope with it. But no matter how many insights or coping you have, it still really hurts.
Yeah, it does. But what a difference it makes to be part of a community, have friends, to not go it alone.
And that's very, very important. And that's what's so nice about the We Don't Die show and the We Don't Die conferences, is it is demonstrating to people that you do not have to go through this alone, and you shouldn't. And on my website, evidenceofeternity.com, there's a page, grief management. And on the grief management page, there are several different other pages about positive ways of coping with grief, different religions' views on the immortality of the soul, spirit contact as a tool in healing from grief. And there's a very important one, Sandra, the best and worst things to say to someone in grief. Because let's say, all right, you're working in an office and one of your coworkers, somebody that you like, her mother dies. What do you say to her? You don't want to go up and people will say things like, well, you'll get through it, be strong. Oh, she's in a better place. Well, life goes on. All right. Although those are well-intentioned statements, those hurt. It's better to say things like, I can't imagine what you're going through.
Right.
Okay. I don't know what to say. I wish I had the right words. Or, I met your mom once and she was just such a nice person. I think she was awesome. Okay, share a happy memory with someone. So there's different ways of approaching that, because a lot of times people don't mean to say something hurtful or offensive, yet sometimes they do. And it's very important to be aware of that. So it's not just the person going through the grief, it's people around that person who need to know how to be supportive. And don't go up and tell somebody, you really should get in counseling. All right, because then what you're saying is, well, you're crazy. Okay. But on the other hand, don't go through it alone. And it's okay to go to grief share groups or group therapy, support groups, because it doesn't mean you're crazy. It just means you need some help getting through this right now.
Yeah, it's only a matter of time before everyone has a loved one who transitions and experiences it. And I know too, Mark, very often when people don't know what to say, they can disappear from someone's life. I've heard so many people say, a good friend of mine just stopped calling me. I think it's that fear of not knowing what to say. They go away.
It totally is, because, well, it's like when you deal with parents who've lost children, what happens is all of a sudden their other married friends sort of melt away because it becomes very awkward. Let's say you have a child who died that's, maybe 10 years old. And then, of course, you're going to socialize with other parents who have children in that age range. It becomes very awkward and uncomfortable. And I've seen this time and time again with parents who've lost children. Now, like with the Helping Parents Heal and other groups like Compassionate Friends, there are support groups and organizations for the angel parents. That's what they've come to be known as, and that's very helpful. But distancing yourself from somebody because they sustained a loss can be very hurtful, very, very hurtful as well.
Yeah, we grieve a second time. Not only did we lose our loved one, but now we lose a good friend. It's tough. So I love what you say. And even the words you said in the beginning, what not to say, I just started cringing how many of those I heard. And it's like, I want to wring your neck. Don't say that. God did not need another angel in heaven.
Yeah, or, well, gosh, like when my dad died, people say, well, he was really old.
Ah,
It's
oh.
like, yeah,
Well, they'll
yeah.
know soon enough. Now, why did you write Never Letting Go? Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I know that deals with healing grief.
Yeah, never letting go is recommended by hospices and grief counselors around the world, and it's in a number of different languages. And I actually wrote that in response to my mother's death. And where I got the impetus for that is for about 2 months after her mom passed, I started going to a grief share group at a local church. And I saw that I seemed to be, I don't want to say healing, let's say recovering faster from the initial shock, um, much more quickly than other people. And then it turned into, well, if your son was here, maybe he'd want you to know this, because what was happening is people's spirits started coming through. And I remember it was at a Catholic church, and the lady that was the facilitator of the group, she was from Ireland. And after one of the meetings, she goes, Mark, you can't be doing this. I go, what? She goes, I know what you're doing. You're talking to dead people here. And I said, well, we're in a Catholic church. Like, isn't that what we do?
Right.
And but no, we can't do it like that. And so I decided to stop going, and I was at a grocery store, and I'll never forget this. I was going to get a carton of milk, and all of a sudden I heard, Mark, and I turned around, and there was this little tiny lady there, and she had gone to the grief group, and I knew that she was like well into her 80s, and she came up and she took my hand and she said, we wish you'd come back to the grief group. You made us feel better.
Oh.
And I hugged her, and what had happened is her husband had died, and they'd been married like 65 years. I mean, it was like a really long, long marriage, and she was completely lost without him, understandably so. And so I remember going home that night, and I started making notes, and I said, you know what? I need to write a book to show people how to get through grief through spirit contact. In other words, spirit contact as a tool in healing from grief. So the title of the book is Never Letting Go. What that means is you have to let go of the sorrow and the agony and the pain associated with the death, but you must never let go of the love for the person who died. And that's where I differ with grief counselors. They say, well, you have to let go. Well, you're not going to. So why? But learn to let go of the things that make you feel guilty and sad and so upset. So that was the genesis, if you will, for my first book, Never Letting Go.
Terrific. And how about your second book, Evidence of Eternity? Can you share about that?
Sure. I was on the Never Letting Go speaking tour, and I was all over the country, and people would come up and ask all sorts of questions. And I started making a list of those questions, like, is there a scientific basis for this? My son committed suicide. Did he go to hell? Do animals have souls? Is there a God? Is there a heaven? Is reincarnation real? I saw this. How can I make sense of this? So I started keeping track of the most poignant questions, and that became the start of Evidence of Eternity. And I'm very, very proud of Evidence of Eternity, if you will. It's the first book of its genre that was submitted and considered for a Pulitzer Prize.
Excellent.
Uh, yeah, I mean, it
Congratulations.
was like, thank you. I'll never forget getting the notification from Columbia University Office of the Pulitzer, and I thought, Sandra, I thought it was a joke. You know what I mean? It's like I get this email and I'm looking at it, I open it up and I go, that's pretty official. And I go, all right, one of my friends is doing something. So I thought, oh, what the heck? I'll call the number, and they answer, go, Columbia University Office of the Pulitzer, Office of the Pulitzer, and I said, really? And so I asked about my book, and they looked it up and gave me the ISBN number. They said, yes, submitted for a Pulitzer, and it's being reviewed by the committee now. And I'm like, OMG. So it is in, I think, 6 or 7 different languages. It's now an audiobook, and Evidence of Eternity, and both my books are going strong. And so now I'm in the process of writing my next book, because people are very, very nice. I mean, they're like,
Hmm.
when's your next book coming out? And they're all excited. And the thing is, and you know this, Sandra, you wrote a book. You just don't whip it out. I mean, it
No,
takes time. Yeah. I mean, it takes time when you can make the time to do it.
it's
And
rare.
if
Hmm.
yeah, prayer, and people are like, well, if it's important enough, you'll make time to do it. It's like, yes, but the creative process is not like flipping on a light switch. You have to be in an environment conducive to the creative process and working and writing, and I absolutely love doing it. Plus the amount of research that I've been putting into all my books. And this new one, I am going much deeper into quantum physics,
Ooh.
substantiating the basis of the soul, the afterlife, how spirit communication works, the very essence of consciousness and existence itself. And the research that I've compiled over the last 10 years is, in fact, actually longer than that, but that's what I am putting into this book. And the most challenging part, well, there's everything about it's challenging, because it's a lot of work,
Hmm.
but take quantum physics and now take a very difficult or esoteric concept and put it into 2 or 3 paragraphs that somebody wants to read. I mean, and there was one day, I'll never forget this. I was trying to understand this one concept, and it was about the different type of particles, and there's the Higgs boson particle, and there's quanta, and there's a quark, and all this stuff. And I just was like losing it. And all of a sudden, in my research, I come across a quote from Werner Heisenberg, and I just burst into laughter. And he said, "When you think you understand quantum physics, you really don't." And I thought, okay, I feel better now. If Werner Heisenberg experienced this phenomenon, it just cracked me up. And but what I've been seeing, Sandra, is that what the great physicists were theorizing. You had Werner Heisenberg, Albert Einstein, Max Planck, Niels Bohr, Louis de Broglie, and you had all of them at the beginning of the 20th century, and there was this explosion of understanding of the universe, not just in the far reaches of space, but on the subatomic level. And all of a sudden, it just made sense to me. And so I would, be doing my readings, and spirits would start telling me things about the nature of the other side and energy transfer and how they communicate, and how everything's energetically interconnected. And then I'd take what they told me and I'd start researching to see if there's anything to back it up. And I was like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. It's like, oh my God, And so that is what has lit the fire in me to work on this new book.
Oh, I love it. I remember the first time I heard that two forms of energy can coexist in the same place, So I've got lights on around me, there's the wireless internet, there's radio waves and all this. And that's when it hit me. Heaven is not out there somewhere. Like the term hereafter, I think is accurate. It's just vibrating in a different level.
Well, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, FM and AM radio coexist in the same space, and they both move at the speed of light. Everything in the electromagnetic spectrum does. And people always ask me, well, are they around me all the time, or are they alone? Well, first off, no, they're never alone because they're pure energy. Secondly, people tend to think of spirits as merely invisible humans with our same finite limitations, and they're not. Certainly, their consciousness, and they carry with them their memories and personality. But being pure energy, they're able to move at the speed of light, which is why they can be around us and are aware of what is happening in our lives. Now, I think that it's very comforting to understand these things and to see how all of this works. I also do not believe that this contradicts the major belief systems in the world. And we were talking before we went on that a lot of people think, mediumship's the work of the devil and blah, 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 blah. And look, I don't get bogged down in nonsense written in the Bronze Age and the Iron Age, which is rooted in fear and all of that. And I certainly have the research to back up why the men, and I stress men, who wrote the Bible is written by men for men to subjugate women and keep men in power. And yes, there's a lot of things in the Bible that were inspired by extremely spiritual people that did have amazing connections with God, but it has been manipulated and twisted for thousands of years so that it can justify people's political agendas. Now, a lot of people get all bent out of shape when I say things like that, but when you start looking at what the great spiritual teachers, like the Hindu sages, Buddha, Jesus, Gandhi, Lao Tzu, the Native American spirituality. Isn't it fascinating, Sandra, how they all reference God in terms of light?
Yes.
This is a reoccurring theme. And isn't it interesting that the only form of electromagnetic energy that we are capable of perceiving with the naked eye is light? And isn't it interesting that when people have immensely spiritual experiences where their consciousness elevates, or better yet, they have a near-death experience or an out-of-body experience, they go into the light. Yes. So we're starting to see right across the board that what Jesus, Moses, Buddha, Krishna were discussing, they were describing their interaction with the spiritual energy of God based on the terminology of the day that was available to them. I mean, even the ancient Egyptians were talking about light in terms of the divine. So did the Babylonians, the Romans, the Greeks, the Chinese. It just goes on and on and on. And so now we have the study of quantum physics, which is helping us to understand this. And that's why I think that the ultimate objective of science is the discovery of God.
That's pretty deep. Pretty cool, though. And even looking at everything around me, as human beings, I think we fall into the illusion that everything is real. And I remember the first time I'd seen that movie, What the Bleep Do We Know, that broke down things into their most tiniest particle. And it's just empty space, vibrating energy.
It is, but then there's another school of thought that something only exists if it can be perceived. And then if it can only exist at being perceived, then its existence is interpreted through that which is perceiving it. So let's say that 200 million years ago, the only thing on Earth that was perceiving anything was a dinosaur. So that existence was only able to be interpreted through the perception of a dinosaur. I'm having a little hard time there.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
On the other hand, yeah, you never know. But I think, though, for me and for, I'd say, probably millions, if not even billions of people want to know. And yes, I grew up in the Catholic Church, and the saying, believing is not seeing, and blessed are those who believe and do not yet see. I tend to agree more with the Buddhists and the Hindus that people need the direct experience. I'm sorry, but reading a book or having somebody tell me, believe what I tell you, doesn't work for me. I want the direct personal experience. And that's where, like Hindus in particularly, what you and I refer to as psychic phenomenon and mediumship is part of the spiritual journey of a Hindu. In other words, in the East, the Hindus and to some extent the Buddhists believe that you should see God and that you can see God. Whereas in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, God is this lofty, distant thing, and you can only get to God. There's only one way. It depends on whose way, who's telling you that. You have to go through that particular faith's clerics and their interpretation of it. Yet then again, when you look at the words of Jesus, did he not say the kingdom of God is within?
Yes.
So while people of religion would have you believe that you can only access the higher power, interface with God through them, Jesus was saying God, the kingdom of God is within, meaning you have your own direct personal relationship with the universe, with God, however you want to term that. I like the word God. Okay, I mean, I'll go on record. I like the word God.
Fair enough. It's great because as far as going on our own journey, I started my journey back in the mid-90s with a fear of dying. And I too was Catholic, but just the faith didn't do it for me to quench the fear. I had to go on my journey of discovery, get involved with everything I could find about the afterlife, have experiential retreats and things like that. And to be where I am today, it wasn't as easy as just faith.
Well, no, but and now I want to jump on the other side of the fence. When people say, "Oh, you're trashing the Bible," well, the Bible is filled with mediums and psychics. Let's take Joseph. Okay, Joseph was brought before Pharaoh because Pharaoh was having disturbing dreams of 7 fat cows emerging from the Nile River only to be devoured by 7 skinny cows, 7 fat ears of corn, so on and so forth. And it was known that Joseph, who was imprisoned at the time, had the gift of prophecy and could interpret dreams. And what he told Pharaoh was there will be 7 years of plenty followed by 7 years of famine. Now, he's telling the future. Okay.
Yes.
So you go a couple a few maybe 50 or 60 passages prior to that, and it's an abomination and all this and that. So the thing is, where we're considered good guys is when they call us prophets and prophetesses, like the prophetess Deborah, who helped the general Barak with her mystical insights to overcome the Canaanites. If you go through the Bible, it's chock full of people with what we would now consider to be psychic abilities, and so that's why you've got to be careful about casting the first stone. I mean, I just love. There's a couple. Well, it's pretty much everything Jesus said. Well, how about everything Jesus said? Was right on target. In fact, Bible scholars feel there's one passage in the Bible that they absolutely believe was translated properly through the centuries. It's when Jesus was at the temples, right before he was arrested and crucified. And the Jewish religion forbids graven images. Yet there was an image of Caesar in the temple. And the Pharisees were there, Roman guards were there, there was a big crowd, so plenty of witnesses. And somebody said, "What about the image of Caesar?" And what they were trying to do is trap Jesus into saying, oh, we got to tear that down, because then the Romans would be able to arrest him right away for defacing an image of Caesar. And then if he said something in support of it, he would be contradicting Jewish law by upholding a graven image. I mean, they really created a very clever trap for him. And then Jesus's response was, render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, but render unto God what is God's. And it was like, he got us. I mean, it's just beautiful. And I remember sitting through a lecture where there were really credible biblical scholars were saying that, this has been interpreted and looked at. And they said this was like the perfect Jesus statement, because they were really trying to trap him. Also, those among you who is without sin cast the first stone. Mm-hmm. And that seems to be not only one of the most important messages, but the one that a lot of people who like to say they're Christian really miss out on following. It's in religion is a good thing as long as it is a conduit to peace.
Yes.
And helping other people and to kindness. But when it becomes a moral justification for anger, bigotry, hatred, and violence, it has nothing to do then with God or the teachings of Jesus or Krishna or anybody else. It then becomes a moral justification for an ego-driven personality's political or financial agenda. And that's where these people that get in there and proclaim, I am a Christian or I'm a Muslim, and then they go and do these horrific things, that has nothing to do with God. It has everything to do with ego, which is edging God out.
Yes. Amen, brother. Wow. I remember seeing you speak, doing a speech a couple of years ago, and it just really touched me because it was like I had no idea that so much. I think you were saying things had been taken out of the Bible, but there are things in the Bible about afterlife communication and psychic prophecy and all that stuff, just how much man influenced it. So it made me feel comfortable that I'm not doing anything wrong studying the afterlife.
Well, certainly not. I mean, since I'm already on the hate list of a bunch of fanatics, Jesus demonstrated every form of psychic ability that there is. Healing, energy healing, foretelling the future. By the time the cock crows twice, you will have denied even knowing me 3 times, that he said to Peter. And then, of course, there's the transfiguration. And so Jesus ascends to the top of a mountain with a select group of disciples. He begins to glow white, and a mist forms around him, and the spirits of Elijah and Moses appear on either side of him. So essentially, Jesus is bringing forth spirits of Moses and Elijah, and they take, if not corporeal form enough to where they could be recognized and identified. Now, that's physical mediumship, and the white mist and the glow and the energy, that's ectoplasm. So when people get all, oh, what you do is evil and all this, it's like, well, your belief system's based on this, a large part of it. So anyway, but an inconvenient truth for those who do not want to accept that God did not close the book on us 2,000 years ago. And God is an ever-present part of our lives, and God is the energy that flows through us, binds us, and connects all of us. So I'm very content in knowing that God is a huge part of my life and the part of all of us. And people say, well, how can God allow this happen or that happen? The real question is, how can we allow these things to happen? Because one of our greatest gifts is free will. And we, as a species and as individuals, do not always make the best use of that gift.
Mm-hmm. Oh, Mark, I love talking with you. Time goes by fast, though. What are you passionate about now? What are you up to? I know you're writing the book, but
Yeah, the definitely the book. Well,
Hmm.
definitely the We Don't Die conference. I do want to talk about that
Yeah, let's
for
talk
a
about it.
minute. So, but this is really exciting. And thank you for inviting me to be the keynote speaker. So, I'll be giving a presentation on the science of the afterlife and reincarnation. But please do not expect watching algebra on stage. I promise you that is not going to happen. Okay, I take the edutainment. I like to educate and entertain and make it interesting. And then I'll also be conducting an evening of spirit communication on Sunday, March 31st, starting at 7:30, and I'll be connecting random audience members with loved ones in spirit. And this whole event's going to be happening at the Holiday Inn Resort at Lake Buena Vista. So, for those of you who want to have the best vacation ever, you'll get a full dose of afterlife and spirituality. And then when the conference wraps up, you've got Disney World and Universal not that far away right there. And Sandra, we're going to have a number of speakers, including yourself. And do you want to talk about some of the other people and topics we'll be discussing?
Oh, absolutely. There's a handful of good mediums there as well, evidential mediums. There's a couple from Scotland who teach mediumship, but from a point where we're all souls having a human experience. So they giving us an exercise to kind of wake up our own soul power. Arizona Bell is coming. She is the co-founder of Spirit Guides magazine. Chris Fitting is one of the mediums, but he does something a little special. He's a spirit illustrator. So instead of just telling you who's around you, he's got his notepad out, and it's just incredible the images that he creates. Dr. Sherry Pearl, I think, is the foremost agent on electronic voice phenomena. She's also knows quite a bit about healing, the power of healing. So she'll be talking about that. I'm super thrilled. William Peters, who you and I both met last year, he has had a near-death experience, and he makes his life about talking about something called shared crossings, not just near-death experiences, but there's something called a shared death experience that often the person next to a loved one will see the white light, will experience the same thing. And so he really takes away the fear of death, I feel, in his presentation. Scott Milligan will be there. He's the world's foremost tutor of physical mediumship. He does great. He's very funny and lighthearted, but really talks about this, something that seems really phenomenal and out there, but it talks about physical mediumship throughout the ages. And I'm super excited that Sonia Rinaldi is coming from Brazil. Sonia is the world's leading scientist on studying, capturing voices and photographs from people in the afterlife. And it may seem too good to be true, but it's not. I mean, she has been working in her laboratory with parents and friends and family of deceased people, and the voices that she brings through and has recorded, and the photographs are amazing. And for the last 32 years, I believe, she's only given it away. So it's not like she's somebody trying to scam the world. I mean, she is the real deal. So I feel like there is a nice group of soul-centered people that are out to serve humanity and make a difference, as opposed to those with the big egos just trying to get rich. So it is some place where, whether you're someone who's experienced loss, someone looking for answers, someone who just wants to find out more, it will be a transformational experience. It'll be fun. If you're traveling by yourself, we will be there to welcome you with open arms, and it will be a life-changing event that you'll walk out having just some of the greatest friends forever that you can talk about these kind of conversations with.
And what I like about this conference, I speak at several throughout the country, and they're all wonderful. But this one, we're not having two speakers speaking opposite. In
No.
other words, everyone that attends gets to see everyone, because the biggest complaint that I've seen is like some like, oh, we're the largest in the world, we're this. Well, bigger isn't always better. Sometimes what's better is to have quality speakers that everybody can see, so that there's not competition. Because I've heard a lot of people saying, well, I wanted to see this person and this person, but they were speaking opposite one another. And so Sandra has basically um, dumped everything that is wrong and is doing everything that is right in these
Thanks.
conferences. Well, I mean, I speak at them all across the country, and this one also, there's a number of good speakers, but people are not going to be overwhelmed by the numbers. This is a quality. This is a quality afterlife event. And I think for people who are interested in this, or people who want to learn more about exploring the afterlife, near-death experience studies, spirit communication, and who feel good about yourself, this is the event for you. And this is the We Don't Die Orlando. And what's the website on that?
Well, easy to remember, we don't die Orlando.com.
Doesn't get any easier than that. That's great.
And we are making a little vacation out of it too. So don't be surprised if you go to Disney on the days after and you see me in line for Space
Well,
Mountain.
I'll tell you what, living in Florida, um, the absolute best time of the year weather-wise is March and April. So you could not have selected weather-wise a better time. It's funny because I see all these people, oh, we're doing an event in July. And it's like, well, it's going to be one of three things: hot, humid, or a hurricane, or all three. So
Well, I'm very excited about it, Mark. And I know from seeing you speak that it's just never enough time. And you've been given 45 minutes here or there. And so you're going to be an hour and a half. If you want to take all that time, you can. But I've always been left wanting more. And even this interview now, I hang on every word you say, and I'm entertained. I'm thought provoked. I'm inspired. I'm comforted. And I'm so grateful I get to call you my friend. Thank you.
oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me on the show. And to all the listeners, please visit the We Don't Die Orlando.com website. If you want to find out more about my tour schedule, which of course includes the We Don't Die Orlando Afterlife Conference, please visit evidenceofeternity.com, and I will be on tour nationwide. I look forward to meeting you. Come up and tell me, hey, you heard me on Sandra Champlain's We Don't Die show. I love it when people tell me the shows that they heard me on, particularly this one.
Oh, great. And I just forgot also, if you're someone who is in the area and may not be able to attend the whole event on Sunday night, if you just want to come for the special evening with Mark Anthony, you can do that too. Just come in for Sunday night. So you can find out details about just getting a ticket to that if you'd like. We don't die Orlando.com. So in closing, Mark, thanks again for being our guest on this great episode 300.
Well, thank you. And to all the listeners, many blessings, and may you find peace, prosperity, and good health this year.
Oh, couldn't have said it better myself. And our home base for this show is we don't die radio.com. And now you can find 300 episodes that will just really make a difference and support you wherever you're at. In closing, my name is Sandra Champlain, and I'm always so happy to be your host on We Don't Die Radio. I do believe that life is an education for the soul, and that your life here on earth is so important. Visit our guest website, evidenceofeternity.com. Join us in Orlando, we don't die Orlando.com. I want to really thank you for listening, and we'll see you soon.